China Global Television Network.
South Africa suspends use of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 vaccine over efficacy concern on new virus strain. Divisions in Somalia as opposition parties reject an extension to the president's term. And new Ebola case detected in eastern DR Congo. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe, and with me in studio with a sneak peek of what's coming up in business news is Uche.
Thank you, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live. Oil prices hit pre-pandemic levels. And Rwanda Air suspends flights to South Africa, Zambia and Zimbabwe due to COVID-19. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. We begin the hour in South Africa, which is weighing its options after trial data of the AstraZeneca vaccine showed it failed to prevent mild cases of the coronavirus variant that's appeared in the country. Government has since suspended rollout of the vaccine and now plans to offer the vaccines developed by Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer. Angela Kopler has more on this story.
There are implications of the AstraZeneca vaccine trial findings for South Africa and other countries where the new variant is prevalent.
The results suggest that the variant has significantly reduced the effectiveness of the virus on mild or moderate infection, and we are uncertain about the impact of the vaccine that it will have on hospitalization, severe diseases and death.
Looking ahead, experts suggest that there's every likelihood that there will be a resurgence of the pandemic in the next 3 to 4 months.
And the question that we need to ask ourselves, in the context of knowing that the COVID-19 vaccines, both AstraZeneca as well as the J&J vaccine, are safe, foremost that they are safe. And even though there are question marks in terms of the effectiveness of the AstraZeneca vaccine against severe disease, do we want to take the risk of not vaccinating high-risk groups now, knowing that we're not going to cause harm, but that they might be protected against severe disease?
Despite the setback, the South African health authorities plan to go ahead with the vaccination of frontline healthcare workers.
We will do the implementation of the vaccine program, but we will link it with an implementation study, which in other words, it means we're going to then have to align our research bodies together with the vaccine rollout network that we had already created.
All is not lost. A second vaccine trial has been underway in South Africa, the Johnson & Johnson AD26 trial, and its data is very promising.
We have data from South Africa to show that we can use this vaccine to protect against death and hospitalization, and we are looking at further data about how this vaccine impacts on mild disease. So this is a vaccine that is a silver bullet. Yes, it won't protect against the sniffles, but it will protect against death and hospitalization.
Frontline healthcare workers are going to have to wait a little while longer for their vaccines, and that's going to have implications on the phase 2 and phase 3 rollouts for the rest of the population. We'll have to wait and see where they get those vaccines from. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, many South Africans have expressed disappointment at news that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine will not be as effective as experts had hoped against the local COVID-19 variants.
For me, it's just a disappointment because the only thing that we were looking forward to and set us free, it was the vaccine.
We can't trust them anymore because what they tell us and what they do is not the same.
The government acted prematurely in terms of buying the vaccine before they could have tested the vaccine. And I wonder whether the monies that they have spent on the vaccine itself, the import vaccine from India, was really necessary, because now we don't know whether the government is money down the drain or not.
All right, so let's bring in Dr. Githinji Gitahi, the Global CEO of Amref Health Africa and a board member of Africa CDC. He joins us via Zoom in Nairobi. Dr. Gitahi, a pleasure to have you with us tonight. So the Oxford AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccine It's been promoted as the best option for Africa, especially given that there is already a system in place to maintain the cold chain. Are these revelations on its efficacy reason for concern as Africa readies to roll the vaccination?
Well, I don't think it is right to say that it's been touted as the best option because there are so many vaccines that are coming up. Of course, there are conditions that Africa CDC and WHO, AFRO, and others, and governments are looking at to say which is better than the other. And those have to do with storage conditions, whether it's 1 dose or 2 doses. We know there are vaccines like Johnson & Johnson likely to be 1 single dose, costs per individual, all these things. So I think to say it's touted as the best would be to be superfluous in a way for now, but would say it's the one that's available that has met many of the conditions that African governments are looking at, as Africa CDC and others look at all the others. But definitely, the issues of efficacy are serious, especially now because we are looking at variants that are coming up. And these are variants of concern. And a variant of concern is something that may affect vaccination, may affect the diagnosis, may affect the severity, and may affect the rate of transmission. And this is what the South African variant is. So it's definitely a concern, which means we need to accelerate vaccination and the conditions of control so that we don't allow the vaccines to just linger for long, because when they linger for long in the bodies, that's when mutations occur. So there is definitely a concern raised by the mutations that may affect the efficacy.
And what you just said, Dr. Gitahi, brings me then to my next question. What does this study on the AstraZeneca vaccine mean for vaccines going forward?
It just means that more trials need to be done. Remember that this particular study in South Africa had not started vaccination, actually, so we can't say they have suspended. They are actually holding on a little longer, because this study was a small study of about 2,000 subjects. There are concerns around the fact that it was largely on young people, and they also did not look at severe disease, protection against severe disease, looked at mild to moderate disease. Remember that most of these vaccines are not stopping infection. They're stopping severity of disease. So it didn't look at severity of disease. And what the South African government is doing is becoming cautious and saying, well, let's hear what the scientists tell us before we start to roll out the vaccination, because they hadn't started. They were waiting to start later this month. So what does it mean for vaccination? It means that vaccination is needed more rapidly, because the reason we have this mutation is because the vaccine has been lingering in human bodies for too long. And as the vaccine uses the human body as a photocopy machine, mistakes occur. Those mistakes are the ones that we call mutations. So the longer the vaccine is allowed to stay in human body, the more the mutations, and the more likely we may get mutations of concern. So the call then would be that we accelerate vaccination, we accelerate the measures that we are taking, and we continue to be vigilant on monitoring the variants, and also making sure that we monitor the side effects and the effectiveness of the vaccines. Remember, all these vaccines are under emergency use authorization. None of them has completed clinical trial phase 3, and therefore that's why we need to be more vigilant on all the areas of efficacy and safety.
All right, picking up on that word vigilance, and another word that you've mentioned severally, mutation. That's a word we've been hearing a lot of, in regards to this virus. And there is concern over the continent's new variants. What is being done to track the variants?
The only way to monitor variants is actually to do genomic sequencing, so that for every sample you collect and it's positive, you actually sequence that particular virus, so that you have a genomic formula or the constitution of that particular virus. And therefore, when you do that, you notice that all of them are the same, and then at some point you notice that one is different, and then you must record that and share with the global network so that people know there's a new variant, and then you start to monitor. And if you look at South Africa through their genomic sequencing, that's how they notice that actually almost 80% of all their new cases are this new variant. So without genomic sequencing, you cannot actually tell when the variants are coming, and therefore when you have a mutation of concern, you cannot recognize it because you don't know it's there. You may just see different patterns of disease or spread of the infection without knowing what's going on. So the Africa CDC is supporting about 8 labs in about 7 or 8 countries or so, including South Africa, Kenya, and others. And this genomic sequencing is what is helping to create a bank of these variants so that you know when you have a new variant. So that's what is being done. And we hope that there can be enough resources to be able to do this globally, including in Africa, and support for Africa CDC to continue doing this so that we can then keep a bank of the types of variants that we are recording and be able to then have control ahead so that the virus is not ahead of us.
All right, Dr. Gideon Jigitai, thank you for talking to us tonight. Somali opposition leaders said they no longer recognize President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo as leader of the country. His term ended today with still no agreement on holding parliamentary and indirect presidential elections. The opposition alliance said they would reject any attempt to extend the president's term. They want to elect a transitional leader until a new president can be chosen by lawmakers. President Farmajo wants to run for a second term. 12 security agents were killed outside the central town of Dusamarib on Sunday. Political leaders were meeting there to try resolve disagreements over the presidential selection process. Now, Abdulaziz Bilo is in Mogadishu. He joins us live from there for more on this. Abdul, what's the latest from Mogadishu now that the president's mandate has essentially expired?
Well, Peninah, you're right. The mandate of President Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo expired today, Monday, exactly 4 years ago. Today, he was elected by more than 329 lawmakers who were gathering at the Mogadishu International Airport, and he was elected as the Somali 9th president. Now, his term officially ended today, and the Council of Presidential Candidates, that is a coalition of presidential candidates who are seeking to oust him in the upcoming election, say that they will no longer recognize him for one, because they're saying that the mandate has expired. That means constitutionally he is not the Somali president, and he wants they want President Farmajo to hand over power to a transitional national council that will be spearheaded by the two speakers of Somali Federal Parliament and the Senate, and they will run the country throughout this transition period and into elections. They're arguing that Farmajo's term has ended and he is a candidate, so they don't want him to influence the outcome of the elections. They want him to join the other candidates on the ground and to level the playing field. And this transitional national council now will be headed by the Speaker of Parliament and Senate. It will also include individuals from the opposition as well as the civil society and also members of the current administration. Now, it remains to be seen how that will be delivered, because there's a clause here in Somalia's constitution that was agreed by Parliament that stipulates all constitutional office holders will remain in place until a new government comes into effect. Now, we don't know how things will go on right now, but there's so much tension going on right now, and today the Parliament met and the Prime Minister is due to arrive there on Wednesday, and it's not clear what will be the agenda of that meeting.
Okay, so that then essentially brings us to the standoff that we're witnessing now, a clause saying the current office holders stay in power until the new administration takes over. Legislators, on the other hand, saying the mandate of the president has expired. What is being done now to resolve that standoff?
Well, the president himself, in an address to members of parliament on Saturday, he said that his administration is still ready to sit down with regional leaders to iron out the issues that remain unresolved of this stage. It is wise to note that the tension that existed in the past was somehow reduced to a certain degree compared to the previous talks that almost failed. But then the president says that he is open for more talks. Regional leaders also say that they need to iron out this issue. They have not ruled out the president's legitimacy like the opposition have ruled out President Farmajo, saying that he's no longer the president. So the international community on the other end has been pushing for talks to take place in Somalia. They've urged Somali federal and regional leaders to sit down and iron out the issue, saying that there will be no power vacuum here in Somalia, and they want the talks to be based on an agreement that was reached by regional leaders and the federal government on September 17, 2020. This deal stipulates the way that elections will be held, who will run the local elections in the regional states, and the body that will be tasked with running the elections at the federal level. So they want the basis of these negotiations and talks to be only limited to that agreement. So the international community community on that end is pushing for that end. And the Prime Minister is expected, according to the opposition, is going to seek a mandate extension of the government, arguing that the government needs more time to deliver on the benchmarks that was stipulated in that September 17 agreement. So it's a wait and see right now, as Parliament is due to meet on Wednesday and listen to the Prime Minister and to know what exactly his agenda is to discuss with Parliament.
All right, Abdul, we appreciate that update. Thank you for joining us. Abdulaziz Bello in Mogadishu. Let's head to Sudan now. Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has dissolved his government ahead of the expected appointment of a new cabinet on Monday. Sudan is scheduled to form a new unity government comprising all parties to the peace agreement signed in 2020. In South Sudan's capital, Juba, CGTN's Patrick Oyet gives us more details.
Sudan's Prime Minister says the outgoing ministers will continue to manage day-to-day affairs. Once the new unity government is formed, then the former ministers will hand over power. The new government is expected to be composed of several political parties. There is a group known as the Forces for Freedom and Change, composed of professionals who mobilized protesters, which led to the overthrow of former President Omar al-Bashir. Another political group is the Sudanese Revolutionary Front, a coalition of 6 parties that signed a peace deal with the Sudanese government last year in Juba. A chief mediator for the Sudanese peace process says he is hopeful permanent peace will return.
All is moving well in the implementation of Sudan's peace agreement. Of course, there are some issues, especially on the allocation of ministerial positions. There are some disagreements, and we are working to resolve those issues. But all in all, everything is going on well.
The government says there are still contentious issues on the ministries of Education and Interior. There is a disagreement over which party should take over the Education Ministry and carry out reforms in the education sector. Many Sudanese people say they don't want the Islamic education introduced during the time of former President Omar al-Bashir. The government says the Education Ministry will remain vacant for now. The army, which is to lead the Interior Ministry, withdrew its candidate, saying it will nominate another one. The peace partners are scheduled to hold a meeting on Tuesday. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
This is Africa Live. We're taking a short break. Coming up, new Ebola case detected in eastern DR Congo. And Myanmar military calls for stability amid nationwide protests.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Juba,
Johannesburg, Ethiopia,
Tanzania. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. To the Democratic Republic of Congo, and a new case of the Ebola virus has been detected in the east near the city of Butembo. The Ministry of Health says the infected person, a woman, has since died. The victim tested positive for Ebola on February 1st and died in hospital 2 days later. The woman was married to a man who had contracted the virus during a previous outbreak. The announcement by the Ministry of Health potentially marks the start of DRC's 12th Ebola outbreak since it was discovered in 1976. weeks. The country announced the end of the 11th outbreak in the West 3 months ago. Here's our correspondent Chris Ochamringa with more details on that story.
So the health minister yesterday announced that this new Ebola case was detected in Butembo city in the east of the country. This is the area where a previous outbreak happened in 2018, and they said it was a woman who was found with the symptoms of Ebola on the 1st of February. She was taken to a health facility in an area known as Biena town, where she died on the 3rd of February. Now, health experts say that it's quite common, for sporadic cases like that which happened to come in place, especially after a major outbreak like the one that happened in 2018, which occurred in the DRC. The officials have called for people to remain calm. They're saying they have a very competent team of health workers in the province, and they're also working with people from Kinshasa and other international agencies to ensure that they identify the people and bring this outbreak to an end. The health minister said that they have already taken samples of the woman. They have brought them to the National Institute of Biomedical Research here in the capital, Kinshasa, to identify the strain of Ebola and determine whether it has any links to the previous outbreaks that occurred in the eastern DRC. The health minister also said that they have already dispatched teams of health experts from the National Ebola Task Force who are going to work with other teams at the province in North Kivu and international experts like the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the World Health Organization has already issued a statement saying that they have already identified 70 people who came into contact with that woman. They have already started disinfecting the places where she went, and they are optimistic that they will be able to bring this outbreak to an end because the DRC has built capacity. This is the 12th Ebola outbreak to happen in this country.
Myanmar's military leader has given a televised address calling for reforms to the country's electoral commission. He accused the commission of using COVID-19 as an excuse and did not allow fair campaigning. Authorities in Myanmar have declared martial law in several townships in the country's second biggest city, Mandalay. They say people are banned from protesting or gathering in groups of more than 5. A curfew will run from 8 p.m. until 4 a.m. The announcement comes after hundreds of thousands rallied across the country against the military takeover and the removal of Aung San Suu Kyi and other elected leaders. A similar declaration has been made in a township in Ayeyawadi, further south, and more announcements are expected. Police reportedly fired a water cannon at protesters in the capital, Nay Pyi Taw, on Monday.
It was like a ticker message that came out on state media where it basically said the country's people refused to accept lawless wrongdoers and talked about legal action for people who harm the stability of the state. Clearly a message at the demonstrators, but at this stage, it's unlikely to have a significant impact on the number of people who would come out. I mean, the point is down the road, if people really felt a threat and this of lethal force at some point, would that have an impact? I mean, could you really picture 60,000 people like we had on the streets yesterday still coming out if they thought there was lethal force? Again, no idea when the military would get to that point and if they would go to that point and use it. I mean, they did use deadly force in 2007 and 1988, but the world is different now. It's so much easier to get visuals out to the outside world. So the question really is how big do these demonstrations continue to build day by day? Where's the military's line where they would start to crack down? And how harsh would their crackdown be? At this point, we just don't know. Their demands are not making an impact in getting the military government to reverse course. I mean, these demonstrators, it's not just the students. You've got teachers, doctors, nurses, engineers, laborers, all taking part of this. So you've got a vast array of society. You've got a big swath of generations who are getting involved with this. I mean, so this, you can clearly see that the movement of the people, that the majority of the population does not want this military government in control. They want the people who they elected back, but so far, none of their demands have been met.
Rescue efforts continue for over 200 people missing in the Himalayas after a glacier broke, sending a torrent of water, dust and rock down a mountain valley. Amateur footage shows the moment the deluge of water washed away parts of the dam. Sunday's surge below India's second highest peak, Nanda Devi, swept away a small hydroelectric project and damaged a bigger state-built one further down the river. Officials say at least 18 bodies have been recovered from the mountainsides. In Haiti, opposition parties have named a top judge as interim leader. It's the latest attempt to oust President Jovenel Moïse, whose term they say has expired. Moïse says he remains president until February next year, an interpretation of the constitution that's been rejected by the opposition. The move has led to protests which intensified on Sunday. Authorities say they foiled an attempt to murder Moïse and overthrow the government. They say nearly 24 people have been arrested, including a Supreme Court judge, for their role in the alleged coup attempt. A new wave of desert locusts in Somalia has forced authorities in the East African nation to declare a state of emergency. The declaration is despite months of effort by the federal government and the United Nations to contain the locust invasion. From Mogadishu, CGTN's Abdulaziz Bello reports.
Somalia has announced a state of emergency over a new generation of desert locusts. Experts attribute the latest invasions to favorable weather conditions. The Somali Ministry of Agriculture says the regions of Hirshabelle, Southwest and Jubaland are some of the hardest hit, with Puntland and Somaliland regions already dealing with a locust invasion from last year.
In the beginning, we saw migrating desert locusts, but they are now creating permanent bases in the southern regions of the country. We are seeing new hoppers that are unable to fly and cannot move to another region. They remain in one place and destroy the entire vegetation.
The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization says Somalia, Kenya and Ethiopia are witnessing more immature swarms that will give rise to multiple generations later this year that will impact overall food security. Across Somalia, locals have been using traditional methods to chase away the desert locusts. Methods include producing smoke, throwing stones and banging pots. In parts of the country, authorities have provided locals with manual pumps and vehicles-mounted pesticide sprayers. The United Nations is leading a massive air campaign against the desert locusts in Puntland and Somaliland. Experts are now proposing the use of agricultural drones through more targeted night spraying. Meanwhile, environmentalists argue that the government must invest in long-term solutions to address the locust menace. The Horn of Africa nation is already dealing with its worst locust invasion in more than 25 years.
The interventionists now are more focused on emergencies, how to control, how to help people that have been immediately affected by this. But we need to think about the long term. And the long term is rebuilding the institution that was specifically responsible for locust control in Somalia. And that means we have to revive the institution in terms of its functioning, capacity development, capacity building for the staff. We need to send people for training on generally on plant protection, but specifically also for locust control. So, and this is what we don't have today.
The United Nations says the locust invasion has been made worse by Cyclone Gati. Gati made landfall on the Somali coast late last year, bringing with it rain and winds that allowed the insects to multiply and spread. Nomads residing in arid and semi-arid lands were among those affected. It's the second time in less than a year that authorities have declared an emergency over the crop-eating insects. Meanwhile, farmers in southern and central regions continue to count their losses while hoping for an immediate solution to ending the crisis. Abdulaziz Bello, CGTN, Mogadishu, Somalia.
In Nigeria, there is a growing burden of cancer, but cancer treatment centers remain few and costly. Also, less attention is being paid to the treatment of the disease now that the nation is grappling with COVID-19. As CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports, health advocates are pushing for better cancer management policies.
A support group meeting for patients and survivors of cancer ongoing in Nigeria's capital, Abuja. Discussions center around the impact of COVID-19 on the treatment of cancer. Gloria Okwu was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2017. Getting access to treatment was very challenging, so much so that she resorted to herbal treatment. But that too wasn't helpful.
And I have to see my doctor. I have to leave my house 5 a.m.
because the queues will be long, and then a few doctors, so that at least by 10 or 11 you have seen your doctor and then you leave. So it's quite stressful. The machines for radiotherapy, I think it's about 8 or 10 machines in the whole of Nigeria to cater to over 200 million people. So you see people traveling from very far distances to go and do radiotherapy, sleeping outside, sleeping in the mosques, you know. People go through a lot of stress to access these treatments.
Gloria is one of the few who have gotten support from groups like this. Many others haven't been as lucky. Cancer is a major health threat in Nigeria. Government sources estimate that annually there are 102,000 new cases recorded, but also 72,000 deaths. And that's why support groups like Project Pink Blue are driving cancer awareness.
Nigeria is really like hosting the greatest cancer burden in the whole of Africa. And the survival rate in Nigeria is like the worst in the entire world. Cancer patients are not also receiving treatment early. So early detection is the key, but early treatment is the key. Because when you detect very early and you're not able to access treatment very early, it's useless. In Nigeria, many cancer patients are not getting clinical trial. What I mean by that is that many of the medicine that are used in Nigeria are not field tested with Nigerians. So basically what we are saying today is that enough is enough. The government needs to make more structural and more fundamental, commitment to cancer control.
Depending on the type and stage, cancer treatments could range between $6,000 and $39,000. A huge financial burden in a country where more than 40% of the people live below the poverty line. Also, the COVID-19 outbreak poses additional risks for cancer patients.
We are not making enough investment in cancer education, cancer treatment, and even the facility. The pandemic has complicated it. The reason why the pandemic has complicated it, the pandemic, because it's something that is life-threatening now, is an existential threat. You have to survive today to think of dying for cancer 10, 20 years down the line. So most governments are putting resources in the pandemic, in the COVID-related issues, that it has taken away money from normal medical approaches.
Health advocates are now pushing for policies that would prioritize the nation's fragile health sector. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
Let's now cross over to Uche for the latest in business news.
Thank you, Peninah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Oil prices hit pre-pandemic levels. And Rwanda Air suspends flights to South Africa, Zambia and Zimbabwe due to COVID-19.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Well, let's start off with commodity markets. Oil prices have made their biggest weekly gain this year, reaching pre-pandemic levels at a one-year high. Now, despite the low demand for oil, there are hopes of a speedier than expected economic recovery attributed to the rollout of vaccines. Brent crude futures gained more than 6% last week to $59.34 a barrel, while WTI climbed almost 9%. Now, each benchmark is at its highest level in more than a year. Other factors have also played their part to push up prices, such as efforts by oil-producing nations to limit output. Since agreeing to the cut in production last April, producers have held back a cumulative 2.1 billion barrels of oil, and that has led to decreasing stockpiles. Now, once the undisputed largest gold producer in the world, South Africa is now tied with Sudan for annual gold production in 11th place globally. That is according to new data from the U.S. Geological Survey on global gold production for 2020. South Africa's production fell from 105 tons in 2019 to just 90 tons in 2020, and that's equal to that of Sudan and Uzbekistan.
The issue facing the South African gold mining and general mining sector is the lack of good government policy.
When you see a lot of the economists and you see a lot of the mining industry people saying policy, we need to improve our policies. That is the single most important factor. Why is there no investment going in our gold mines, and why does our production continue to shrink?
Others believe the decline is also due to structural issues.
Well, I think it's been 20 years in the making, so I think we should acknowledge it is structural. Our mines are getting deeper. The cost of production has gone up, sometimes because of depth, sometimes because of inefficiencies like Eskom's power increases, etc. And then obviously society has demanded much higher safety standards, correctly so, and that has increased the cost of production.
Analysts say there are several examples of the impact that good policy has on the mining sector.
We saw tens of billions of dollars flood into Zambia, which is not even a small percentage of what South Africa is. We saw tens of billions of new foreign investment go into the DRC. We saw probably about $10 billion go into Tanzania, which hardly anybody knew even had minerals. So it shows what policy change, the right policy can do.
Local regulations are not keeping pace with the changes in the mining sector, it's claimed.
There are regulatory issues. So as the previous generation of mines gets mined out, we are not regulating for new mines. I'm told that there are significant opportunities of shallow mining, open cast mining under Witwatersrand, the northern, the sort of East Rand and the West Rand, but also in the Pilgrim's Rest area. But these are all caught up in regulatory sort of delays.
Gold production is hitting an all-time high this year. Gold production has been hitting an all-time high for every year for the last 30 years. Now, somebody should ask, why is it hitting an all-time high? Why is every country on the planet producing more gold today than it was yesterday? And tomorrow they'll be producing more. Why are all those countries producing more, and the country that had more than half the world's gold is producing less each day?
The gold mining industry in South Africa has been in decline for a number of years now, and much of the reason for that has been blamed on the lack of good policy. Hopefully government will see the light. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Now, Rwanda's national carrier has suspended its flights to South Africa, Zambia and Zimbabwe in an attempt to contain the spread of a new coronavirus variant. The move comes after South African authorities detected a new variant of COVID-19 that was rapidly spreading in its provinces. Now, Rwanda is amongst the nations recently added to the UK's coronavirus travel ban list. UK officials say the decision to expand its travel ban to Rwanda was recommended by UK scientists due to Rwanda's limited gene sequencing testing capacity. And the recent lockdown imposed by the Zimbabwean government has impacted businesses across the nation with the aim to curb the spread of COVID-19. Residents have been barred from leaving their homes except to purchase daily necessities and to receive medical treatment. The countrywide policy also enforces a curfew from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. the following day. During curfew hours, only supermarkets, pharmacies and hospitals are allowed to be open. Weekend markets are amongst the businesses affected, with the number of customers greatly declining to a third of the customer base before the ban. Now, despite the inconvenience to people's lives and the impact on livelihoods, many still support the government's lockdown measures in the face of this deadly pandemic.
The number of walk-in clients has reduced, but there are still customers that are ordering our mushrooms that need home delivery.
It's been very detrimental to Zimbabwe, the lockdown, because a lot of these people have lost their income. So now it's okay, I can have the food, but it is a reduced income and the same running costs. So it has been difficult to keep the space, to hold the space for these people. But we are Zimbabweans, we know what difficulties are. We have had lots of difficulties in our lives and we are resilient people. We make a plan.
And shifting focus now, aerospace giant Rolls-Royce is proposing to temporarily close its jet engine factories for 2 weeks as it manages costs due to the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, the move is expected to affect all 19,000 staff in the company's international civil aerospace division. The aero engine maker has begun talks with unions on the shutdown and cost-cutting at its civil aerospace unit. Rolls-Royce finances have been hit by the pandemic after its airline customers grounded planes. The company warned last month that travel will be even more constrained than expected this year, leading to increased cash outflows. Now, in a bid to boost Spain's battered hospitality sector, Madrid has decided to slightly relax its COVID-19 restrictions, including increasing the number of people that can meet outdoors. Here's Rahul Patak explaining.
It has been a really difficult year because we were in lockdown at home for 3 months. We couldn't open the bar but had to pay the rent.
Suki Castillo has been running the Café K Belgian bar in the centre of Madrid for the past 21 years. But it's been the last 12 months that have been the most challenging thanks to the pandemic. So Friday's decision by the Madrid government to slightly relax their COVID restrictions, including increasing the amount of people that can meet at outside bars, is good news for the bar owner, but as a Madrid resident, she is concerned.
As a Madrid citizen, I think they should lock us down fully for 15 days. And then, when we can go out, everybody does respect the rules.
Now, Suki's bar is located right next to Plaza Mayor, which is arguably one of Madrid's biggest tourist hotspots. And the street that a bar sits on is home to around 30 businesses ranging from cafes to bars to restaurants. As of today, the amount of establishments that remain open, 7. And that's why Madrid's regional president is so desperate for the local economy to get going again, with the region's hospitality industry hemorrhaging money week by week. Madrid's Deputy Health Minister says even with the capital still suffering the effects of the third wave of the pandemic, going to bars and restaurants was relatively low risk.
La de ampliar a 6 el número de personas que podrán reunirse en una terraza.
Our detailed research shows that the highest number of infections don't occur within the hospitality industry. High infection rates happen within the family environment and social gatherings.
From Friday, groups of up to 6 people will be allowed to gather at outdoor restaurant terraces in Madrid. The region of Catalonia, which includes Barcelona, has seen a sharp drop in its rate, and Monday will see them ease some rules. The Balearics region has also seen its rate drop, but bars and restaurants remain in lockdown until February 13th. For the bar patrons of Madrid, Friday was definitely a step in the right direction. But while the Madrileños enjoy their drinks, there is the fear that the regional government may not have learnt their lessons from last year, when Madrid arguably came out of lockdown too quickly, thus kick-starting the second wave. Time will tell. Rahul Pathak, CGTN, Madrid.
And meanwhile, flower growers in China are amongst many hit hard by the coronavirus pandemic. But they're now hoping the Spring Festival will help them recover. Many are now turning to live streaming services in order to boost their sales. Here's CGTN's Makia reporting from southwest China.
White willows, orchids and winter sweets, decorated with festive cars and ornaments. It's a ritual for many families roaming around Kunming's famous flower market at this time of the year.
We've lived here all our lives. We can't travel far, and this place is so lively and so pretty.
We buy flowers every year. These are my wife's favorites.
This year, we are answering the call not to go out too much during the Spring Festival, but it's still important to decorate the house.
The Dounan Flower Market has long been regarded as the weather van of China's flower industry. For every 10 flowers sold nationwide, 7 are from this place. But, like many industries, it's been badly affected by the pandemic.
Not so good. I used to earn 1,000 yuan per day during the holiday. Now I only earn half. Deliveries to high-risk areas are either expensive or prohibited, and there aren't as many tourists as before.
However, some industry players have been looking at other options.
New Year flowers take up 15 to 20% of a flower grower's annual income. Last year, the pandemic cost them at least 2 billion yuan. This year, we're trying different sales modes, like online platforms, which get most orders at night, so we've extended the opening hours till midnight.
Because many flower growers aren't familiar with e-commerce practices, they turn to special sellers known as online flower agents, who can market their products all over the country.
This is what it looks like at 8 o'clock in China's largest flower market. While the daytime market mainly targets individual customers, the night market is where the real business gets done.
These flower agents use live streaming services and sell at much lower prices than at typical flower shops. A good flower agent can take over 100 orders a night. It's hugely significant for many of the flower growers here, whose livelihoods for the next lunar year depend greatly on the holiday sales. Ma Ke, CGTN, Kunming.
And that is all for now on Africa Live Biz, but still to come on Global Business Africa, we'll be delving into South Africa's decision to suspend the use of AstraZeneca's COVID-19 shot in its vaccination program. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in sports. African champions Al Ahly take on European champions Bayern Munich in the Club World Cup semi-final.
How would you create your legend? On the fields, on the tracks, in the arenas of Africa. Were you born to be a player? Could this moment be yours? Sports Scene. Find your game.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
We start with global football, where after winning their first Club World Cup match against Qatar's Al Duhail, Al Ahly is now getting ready to play against Bayern Munich. Egyptian football fans are excited to see their players go up against global football icons in Doha. Hope fills the country as many wish the Egyptian Red Devils do the impossible on Monday's semi-final match. CGTN's Adel Mahroui has more.
The Egyptian Red Devils have managed to take over Club World Cup host Al Duhail with a 1-0 victory. Al Ahly striker Hussein El Shahat scored his first goal in the competition 30 minutes into the game. Next, Africa's giants will clash with Europe's top team this year,
Bayern Munich.
It's a big test for Mosimane. A victory against Bayern Munich would be an astonishing achievement in his record. He managed to accomplish so much in Africa. He will be looking forward to extending his beyond. But he's facing a totally different school of football, one that he lacks the experience to face. It's still a chance for any coach to present the best he has.
Out of its 6 participations in the competition,